lovelies, welcome to yet another episode of Untwine with Naledi, where I'm your host, Naledi Mohodiri, and on this channel, you will nourish. This channel focuses on all things about positivity of the mind, the body, the soul, and we also dwell on topics that are related to God. So if you are new on this channel, we give you a warm welcome. And today we are going to be talking about a topic which is quite close to me and one that I really hope that you guys can resonate with. And today's topic is going to be finding peace in the storm. Okay, guys. When we talk about finding peace in the storm, I'm relating to making lemonade out of lemons. I'm talking about finding yourself in a place of acceptance of a situation that is very uncomfortable, but having hope and faith that you will see yourself on the positive end of things. So yeah, let us get into it. So are you somebody that has found themselves in a cycle that is not ending? Are you somebody that has found themselves in a point in which right now you're just like, God, I am holding on, I've been holding on, I've been keeping the faith, but at this point in time, I'm just at a point in which I just cannot hold on anymore? Are you at a point in which you are just like, God, let your will be done. At this point, what is happening is out of my hands? Or are you also somebody that is just like, this is too much for me, Lord? At this point, I'm fully giving in and I'm just saying, whatever happens, happens. I feel in some point in your life, you may have felt this way and you may have felt like, oh, is there actually a result that could yield anything positive from what I'm going through right now? I am going through this test and it seems like the more I keep on having faith, the more I keep on being reeled into this darkness that is not showing me the light for which that is with God, because my actions, what I've been saying, what I've been praying for is something that is pointing towards that direction, but what I'm receiving in return is not in relation to what is for God. We are going to be dwelling into all of that today, so please do chill, relax, enjoy yourself, and I hope that in some form or way what we are going to be sharing today actually relates to you. So when we talk about finding peace in the storm, we are talking about being at a position in which you have so much faith inside of you that you can no longer allow what is not for you to carry on happening. You can no longer allow evil forces to make their way through in your life. You can no longer allow obstacles to stand in the way of you being able to see God's grace and mercy upon your life. You can no longer be put at a point in which all you look forward to doing within a day is waking up and going to bed and waking up and going to bed, and it just feels like one repetitive cycle where you cannot take a moment to actually embrace the fact that you have been graced with yet another day. There comes a point in life where we go through all of these emotions at once, where it is completely normal to feel like at a certain point in time you've run out, you've run dry, you're in a season of just feeling very tired and feeling very drained. But it is important to also acknowledge that in that season of feeling that way, you are to acknowledge who God is. You are to also let Him know of how you are feeling so that He can restore you. And by saying this, I'm not saying that you can feel down today and then tomorrow it is sorted. No, none of that. When we talk about peace in the storm can be something so great in which you cannot even measure having thought of thinking to experience that ever in your life, but some way, somehow, you find yourself in that situation. And you may even sit down and ask yourself, like, how am I going to be able to find God in the situation that I'm going through right now? Because I don't believe and I don't think that this is something that God would bestow upon my life. And with all these thoughts, one thing I would like to emphasize is to go back to taking the time to understanding that life is about going through obstacles. When they say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, some of these obstacles can be ones in which can really be testing over one's faith. And when I say testing, I mean you can be at the brink of feeling like I'm at a point where I'm really ready to just turn away. I'm ready to look the other way and behave and act like I never for an ounce in me saw the light of God. Knowing God and hearing of God is such an amazing thing when you hear of His great works, when you hear of His greatness. But when you come across people who have seen God in all shapes and forms, who have been able to call Him out in situations that you wouldn't even think that would I be able to call God's name in this situation. If you have those people in your life, those are the people that you are to always keep close to you so that they can keep you in check. Those are the people that are going to give you the strength and resilience to keep on pushing through. There are people in your life that you need to understand that God has placed intentionally so. And when I say intentionally so, I say that because through every season of turmoil that you can be going through, there comes a point where you are able to see that at this point, God has placed somebody in my life. There is just oftentimes going to be at least somebody that is able to be there, you know. And if there isn't somebody, God is going to place you at a point in which some things they are not for you to experience with other people, but they're for you to experience with Him and only Him. And the reason behind that is because God wants us to be His children. He wants us to remember that before anything else, we are His. And by saying that, I mean to say that we are to give all credit and honor to Him for everything that we go through in life, When we talk about all these turmoils, when we go through seasons of darkness and hardness, a lot of the times we can feel loneliness. And then when you find somebody who's able to take you out of that, you feel like, okay, now there's hope. You finally feel like there's some form of light. But what we often tend to do as people is that we tend to give value to things that shouldn't, or people that shouldn't be taking the credit that which is for God. And it's also okay for you to see God in other people, but you also need to remember that God is still God, in all ways, in all forms, and in all facets of our lives. So with finding peace within the storm, you find yourself at a point in which you just need to isolate, you need to pray, speak to the Lord. Sometimes you need to act oblivious to what is actually happening. If you're finding yourself in a spiritual warfare, finding yourself in difficulties, finding yourself at a point in which you're just like, God, I understand that this may be a testing time for me in my life. I understand that I may not be knowing where the resultant is of what I'm going through right now. I may not be understanding where you are taking me, but I'm simply asking that even with what I'm going through right now in my life, I'm asking that you carry me through this season, carry me through this phase, because The load in which I'm carrying right now is far too heavy, far too great for me to go through on my own. God puts us in these situations so that we can be reminded of who He is. We can be reminded of His power, and we can be reminded of what He can make out of us, you know. We may not always understand the work that God is doing within our lives and the reasoning behind why certain things have to happen a certain way or at a certain time within our lives. But that is when we ought to understand that when we say, Thy will be done, we ought to understand what we mean by that. When we say, Thy will be done, do we understand what we are saying when we say that? Do we understand that we are saying, Lord, with everything that's happening, I am saying, no matter how I may not understand where you're taking me, I need to trust in that wherever it is, whatever light you want to show me, I am going to end up victorious at the end of the day. I also need to have the hope of understanding that, okay, right now, this is your time for you to use me. Right now, I need to open myself up to understanding that there is something that you want me to take from this. In as much as we can say it didn't kill me, there are tools that you want me to have in this phase, in this season that you know I'm going to need for the near future. There's a message that you want me to take from the situation I'm going through right now so that I can be able to share it with the next person who's going to be going through something similar, if not even more worse than what I'm going through. And you ought to understand the way God works. And if you're somebody who's also very self-aware and also aware of your surroundings, you often find that when you're going through these things, there are often people who I can say are anchors who keep you accountable for showing up for yourself. If you know that you cannot do this, at least you have your mother, you have your father, you have a sibling, you have family that will always redirect you. You have friends that will also always redirect you towards the walk you should be taking. They will redirect you towards what is for you. They will redirect you to showing you God's light, And finding peace within the storm is about really canceling out all the noise, taking a break from everything that is happening. When I say taking a break, I'm simply saying shutting down everything that is distracting you from being able to understand what the Lord is communicating in your life. And by that, I mean understanding the fact that, yes, I'm in this season, but understanding why am I in this season? Out of the season I'm in, what is it that God wants to point out in my life, that He wants me to see through? Out of the season that I'm in, what is it that God is telling me that He wants me to grasp onto? How is what I'm going through right now going to help me in any way? And out of these questions, some you may get answers to, some you may not even get answers to, like in the physical world. But you ought to understand one thing, which is the fact that, guys, there comes a greater strength, a greater you, a greater standing of you being who you are when you understand who you are in God's light. And that is understanding that knowing God does not always mean that you are only going to have great things coming your way. Because if that is what you are expecting, then how else are you expected to grow? How else are you expected to evolve? How else are you expected to be a different version of who you were before who you are now? How else are you going to become the person you envision yourself becoming one day? I'm not saying that has to come with hardships, but it definitely has to come with things that are going to test you in your life, that are going to put you in a position where you have no other choice but to take an alternative different from the route that you always take. With that being said, the common denominator in all of that should always have God in it. Because once you know that you have God, you know that even with everything that is happening, God is going to be able to see it through. God is going to show you the light. God is going to show you that, my child, yes, you may be in a situation that is very much uncomfortable for you, but I also want you to find comfort in the uncomfortable, because in that way I am going to show you that I'm still God. I also want to show you that should I strip anything from you that is of the world, that is not what I want for you in your life, you should understand that I, as the Lord, am still your God. I'm still your God. I'm still your God. I still rule over your life. I am the one who is going to lead you every step. I'm the one who is going to show you the way. I am the one who is going to give you grace. I am the one who is going to show you the path of righteousness. God says to us that I am the great I am. But he also says, for I have good plans for you, plans to help you prosper, plans that will not make you perish, but you ought to trust in him, because he will make a way. There's another Bible verse that says, ask the Lord to bless your plans and you will be successful in seeing them through. Some of these tests and trials that we go through them, a lot of the times we feel like those spiritual warfares, those hardships are what is going to end us. But you need to understand that you need to go through those things to understand that he is still God. Because for a moment within your life, if you felt like there is still doubt in what God says is going to happen over your life, you are going to revert back to understanding that he is God. And for as long as you have not understood that, you are going to feel like you're going through a cycle that is not ending, because that simply means that you are not understanding the magnitude of who God is over your life. You are not understanding that you need not to have any form of control over what God does in your life. You need to have humbled yourself to the point in which you don't know what is going to happen tomorrow, but you are trusting that the path that he's going to pave for you is what he wants for you. So having peace in the storm rather comes in being fully fledged within your faith as a Christian, within your standing, within who you say God is, within yourself as well. The moment you have faith, that's when the peace comes in. And when you have peace, you are able to let go of all these other things that can consume the mind, such as overthinking, anxiety, depression, you know. All of this is easier said than done, but a lot of it requires you working on yourself. And like I said, it's not something that's going to happen today for tomorrow, but once you start putting in the work, everything starts to become a lot more bearable, and it also becomes a lot more easier. So, in a sense of your overall mental state of how you conquer all of this, it's also going to highlight a lot of the things that you still need to develop within yourself, right? And it also is going to highlight your insecurities and also your imperfections as well. And I think I can say personally that this is where the hardship comes in terms of knowing God. Why do I say this? Because knowing God means there's still room for improvement, right? There is also still room for you to see yourself in the light of God, which is the way we are walking towards. But with all of that, it means you have to be able to face yourself. Are you able to face the real you, the you that knows that I still need to work on this part of myself? And when you are able to face that version of you, that is when you know that you are walking towards the greener pastures that the Lord wants you to be in. Why? Because the Lord knew that you are going to go through those challenges in your life. But the end result of who you become is determined by you. Should you choose to change? Should you choose to want to be better? Should you choose to want to walk in His light? So, yes, tests are there for us to have testimonies. Tests are there to want to make us better versions of us. But tests are also there to show us that we are stronger than we think we are. And yes, the strength is not something that obviously comes from us, but from the Lord Himself. But it also goes to show that it also brings upon confidence in what you pray for, you know. It develops a relationship with being a stanched and a steadfast believer in a form in which you no longer walk with fear, but you know that you walk with the light of God. You are no longer shaken by the things of the world because you know that you don't conform to them. You are no longer shaken and taken by materialistic things that you know that should you be on your deathbed tomorrow, they will mean nothing. You are literally understanding that it is the Spirit of God that is moving you from one point to the next, and it is by the will of God that everything that you wish for, it shall be granted upon you over your life. And there's a level of peace once you get out of that season within your life, right? And when I talk about this peace, it's peace of not only walking around saying I know God, but with that peace, you now know that you ought to put respect to His name, but beyond that, you also understand that you are not your current situation in life, but God is building something within you that is far greater than where you are right now. And embracing that, understanding that, and walking with that gives you a certain level of grace, a certain level of confidence, and a certain level of also humbling yourself, of understanding that you do not judge a book by its cover. You know, you don't look at a person the same after that, because you understand that what God has placed in somebody's heart according to what their purpose is on this world differs from one person to the next. And you ought to obey that. You ought to understand that. You ought to respect that. But more than anything, you ought to respect yourself and who God has made you to be. You ought to understand that you are greater than what you're going through. We say God would not place you in a situation that He feels you cannot handle. You ought to understand what that actually means. And you need to see that if you were ever exposed to light before the season of turmoil, you need to believe that you can go back to that place again, because your current situation does not determine where God is going to take you. As we gather the understanding of what peace is over our lives, we also ought to understand that with the distractions that happen within ourselves, around ourselves, the main point that we ought to do is to understand what lies within, which is finding ourselves. And with finding ourselves, we understand that there's work that needs to be done. For as long as you're not willing to put in that work, then that means you are comfortable with where you are at. With that work comes understanding and acknowledging and identifying that, okay, I'm in this situation right now, but how do I then have God involved in it? You pray about it, you let Him know, you become raw with yourself, you become raw with the Lord, you let God know of your true feelings, where you surrender yourself, knowing that at this point, whatever the Lord wants to say over my life, I am to obey it, simply because you know that there is no other God beyond the God that we pray to, you know. And upon that, we also walk around understanding that, okay, within this situation, I do not know where I'm heading, but I am trusting Him. As dark as it may be, the fact that I knew what it once was like to know God, the God that I was worshiping so loudly, the one who I was singing His praises to, is the same God as I'm standing here today. He is the same God who's going to help me out of this situation. Please also remember another thing. What you are going through right now is only temporary. What you are going through right now can only be stopped by God, yes. But I need you to trust in the fact that you are not stagnant with the period, with the phase you are in, because God is going to see you out of it, because God's love and who God is in our lives, He did not bring us on this earth to have you questioning your purpose, to have you questioning whether you are meant to be here. What God has brought over your life is something that is meant to empower others. So for as long as you are here, you ought to walk in His light, even when you do not know where tomorrow brings. You ought to walk in His light, trusting that He will bring forward the mandate of showing you what tomorrow's day looks like. So trust in yourself. Have confidence in the fact that God has something beautiful bestowed upon your life, something great, greater than you even, and something that is also going to help nations and generations that are going to follow you. All you need to do is tap into understanding the greater you and understanding that you can even find peace within the storm if you just choose to walk in God's light. If you've watched until this point, thank you so much for being the realist. Please don't forget to hit the like button and also subscribe if you haven't already. Please also don't forget to leave a comment below, because I love hearing from you guys.
From my end, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to hear from you guys. Much love. Mwah.